The war room fell silent as the human delegation entered. Ambassador Velmoth watched them walk with steady steps across the polished floor. The humans looked small compared to the other species gathered there. General Crix, with his 4 powerful arms, stood twice their height. The Centauri elders glowed with soft blue light from their crystalline bodies. Even Velmoth's own people towered over these newcomers from Earth. But something in their eyes made Velmoth uneasy. Commander Hyun Tae led the group. His uniform was simple, dark blue with silver markings. He carried no weapons, yet every movement suggested readiness. Behind him walked Captain Hana Kai, her sharp gaze scanning the room like she was memorizing every exit. A woman with kind eyes, Dr. Yuna Bayek, smiled at the assembled aliens. But even her smile held something Velmoth couldn't name. "Thank you for meeting with us," Commander Hyun said. His voice was calm, almost soft. "We understand your situation is desperate." General Crix made a sound like grinding stones. "Desperate! The Void Swarm has consumed 47 star systems. We have retreated for 47 years. Yes, human, we are desperate." His 4 eyes fixed on Hyun. "But what can your species offer? Your ships are slow. Your weapons are primitive. You have barely left your own solar system." Hyun didn't flinch. "That's true. By your standards, we're far behind." He stepped forward. "But we've studied your battles. We've seen the patterns. And we know why you're losing." The room erupted. Voices rose in anger and disbelief. How dare these primitives judge the Coalition's military strategy? Velmoth raised a hand for silence. "Explain," Velmoth said quietly. "You fight to survive," Captain Hana said, speaking for the first time. "Every battle, every decision, your priority is to preserve your forces. Minimize casualties. Protect your people." She paused. "That's why the swarm is winning. They know you'll always choose retreat over risk. And you would do differently?" Elder Miran's ancient voice echoed through the chamber. "You would throw away lives carelessly." Dr. Yuna stepped forward. "Not carelessly, but we understand something you've forgotten over your millions of years of civilization." She looked at each alien face in turn. "Sometimes, to save everything, you have to risk everything." General Crix laughed, a harsh sound. "Bold words. Let me show you something." He activated a holographic display. Images of the last battle filled the air, ships burning, soldiers dying. "The swarm outnumbered us 5-1. We lost 30 ships before we retreated. By your logic, we should have stayed and died." "No," Commander Hyun said. "By our logic, you should have attacked." Silence. "Attacked?" Velmoth couldn't believe what they were hearing. "Into superior numbers?" Hyun nodded. "The swarm expects retreat. They've learned your patterns over 47 years. They know you'll pull back when casualties reach 15%. They plan for it." He manipulated the hologram, showing the battle from a different angle. "Here, when your center fleet pulled back, it exposed your flanks. The swarm divided your forces. If you had pushed forward instead, concentrated fire on their command ship, the entire formation would have collapsed." "At what cost?" Crix demanded. "Maybe 50 ships instead of 30, Hana said flatly. "But you would have destroyed their fleet. 100 swarm vessels gone. That's a trade worth making." Velmoth felt cold. These humans discussed death like it was mathematics. The negotiations continued for hours. The humans wanted full integration with coalition forces. They wanted access to all tactical data. They wanted command authority in joint operations. General Crix argued against every point, but slowly, the coalition leaders began to listen. It was late when Velmoth found Commander Hyun standing alone, looking out at the stars through the massive window. "Your people frighten us," Velmoth said honestly. "The way you speak about war, about death, it's cold." Hyun was quiet for a moment. "We're not cold, Ambassador. We feel every loss. But we learned something on Earth long before we reached the stars." He turned to face Velmoth. "We learned that predators exist, that safety is an illusion, that the universe doesn't care about fairness or justice. And this makes you better warriors? It makes us survivors." Hyun looked back at the stars. "Every species in your coalition evolved on peaceful worlds. You developed intelligence, built civilizations, reached the stars. You met each other and formed alliances. The universe seemed reasonable to you. And Earth was different. Earth tried to kill us every day," Hyun said softly. "Predators, diseases, disasters. We almost went extinct a dozen times. We learned to fight, not because we wanted to, but because everything else wanted us dead." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "The swarm isn't new to us, Ambassador. We've been fighting swarms since before we had language. Locusts, ants, viruses. We know how to fight an enemy that sees us as food." Velmoth understood then. The humans weren't cold. They were scarred. Their entire species carried wounds from their violent world. "If we agree to this alliance," Velmoth asked, "what do you want in return?" "A place in the galaxy," Hyun said simply. "Recognition as equals, despite our primitive technology. And," he hesitated, "a promise that when this war ends, you'll help us find other survivors like us. Other species that had to claw their way up. We don't want to be alone in what we are." The next day, the Coalition Council voted. It wasn't unanimous, but the decision was made. Humanity would join the war. Dr. Yuna stayed behind to teach Coalition forces about human methods. Velmoth watched the first training session with growing concern. Human soldiers ran until they collapsed, then got up and ran more. They practiced shooting until their hands bled. They fought hand-to-hand with an intensity that frightened the Coalition troops. A young Centauri soldier approached Velmoth after the session. "Ambassador, is it true what they say? That humans only sleep 4 hours a night?" "Some sleep even less during war," Velmoth replied. "But why? Don't they get tired?" Velmoth thought about Commander Hyun's words, about a species shaped by a world that tried to kill them. They do get tired. They just don't let it stop them. Captain Hana was training Coalition Special Forces in close combat. Velmoth watched her throw a soldier twice her size to the ground. "Again," she said, not even breathing hard. "In real combat, the swarm won't give you time to think. You have to move on instinct." "But I could have hurt you," the soldier protested. Hana smiled. "That's the point. If you're afraid of hurting your training partner, you'll die against the swarm." She helped him up. "Pain is temporary. Death is permanent. Remember that." That night, Velmoth sent a report to the Coalition Council. The humans were everything they claimed to be. Skilled, determined, relentless. But the report ended with a question that kept Velmoth awake. "We asked these humans to teach us how to fight. But have we considered what we might become if we learn too well?" The first Joint Fleet exercises began the following week. Commander Hyun's ships moved in patterns Coalition admirals had never seen. Aggressive, risk-taking, unpredictable. General Crix watched from the command center. "They're going to get themselves killed," he muttered. But they didn't. The human ships danced through simulated combat like they were born to it. They took hits that would make Coalition captains retreat, but they held their positions. "Sir," an officer said, "their casualty projections are 30% in this scenario." "And they're still pressing forward," Crix observed. "Madness. Or courage," Velmoth suggested quietly. The simulation ended with a human victory. Crix stared at the results. By every reasonable standard, the humans should have lost. They were outgunned, outnumbered, and sustained terrible damage. But they won. Commander Hyun's face appeared on screen. "Good exercise, General. When do we face the real thing?" Crix looked at Velmoth. The ambassador saw the same question in the general's 4 eyes that echoed in their own mind. What had they unleashed? "Soon," Crix said. "Very soon, you'll get your war." Hyun smiled, and for the first time, Velmoth understood what made humans different. They weren't smiling at the thought of peace or victory. They were smiling at the thought of the fight itself. The alliance was formed. The training was complete. Tomorrow, humans and coalition forces would face the Void Swarm together. Velmoth could only hope they had made the right choice. The alarms began at dawn. Not that space had dawn, but the coalition forces still kept to their homeworld's cycles. Rest periods, meal times, everything organized and predictable. The Void Swarm had learned to use this against them, but humans didn't sleep on schedules. Lieutenant Minho Song was already awake when the alarms sounded. He'd been checking his squad's equipment for the 3rd time. Private Gina Rhee sat nearby, staring at nothing, that strange look in her eyes that meant she was thinking several moves ahead. The other Marines called her the Ghost because she always seemed to know what would happen before it did. "Terminus Gate," Gina said quietly. "They're hitting Terminus Gate." Minho didn't ask how she knew. He'd learned to trust her instincts. "Gear up," he called to his squad. "We're moving in 2 minutes." The coalition forces were still pulling on their armor when Minho's Marines reached the hangar bay. Captain Hana Kai was already there, talking with Commander Hyun through her comm device. "The swarm numbers look bad," she said, her face calm despite the words. "Early scans show at least 200 vessels. Coalition doctrine says retreat if outnumbered more than 2 to 1, Hyun's voice crackled back. "We're outnumbered 4 to 1. "Good," Hana said, and Minho heard other Marines nearby chuckle darkly. "Means we won't run out of targets." On the bridge of the Coalition flagship, General Crix stared at the tactical display with 4 eyes that had seen hundreds of battles. Watcher Jurtal stood beside him, all 6 of their eyes recording everything for the war archives. This would be an important moment, one way or another. "The human ships are moving forward," an officer reported, voice tight with stress. "Order them back into formation," Crix commanded. "Sir, Commander Hyun says they're going hunting." Jurtal's eyes focused on the display. The human ships weren't retreating. They weren't even holding position. They were accelerating directly toward the swarm fleet. "Are they insane?" Crix roared. "They'll be torn apart." Velmoth watched from the diplomatic station. The ambassador had insisted on observing the battle, needing to see what humanity truly was when faced with death. Now Velmoth wondered if that had been a mistake. The swarm ships were massive, organic things that looked like they'd been grown rather than built. They moved in perfect coordination, the hive mind controlling each vessel like cells in a body. The pattern was familiar. First, they would probe the defenses, then they would find weak points. Finally, they would overwhelm with sheer numbers while the coalition forces retreated to minimize losses. But the human ships didn't wait for the probe. They split into 3 groups and dove into the swarm formation like predators hitting prey. "What are they doing?" an officer whispered. Jurtal understood first. "They're forcing close combat. The swarm's advantage is coordination at range. Up close in chaos, they're just individual ships." The first human vessel took fire from 5 swarm ships. Its shields flared, failed, and armor began to burn. Coalition protocols said retreat. The ship should pull back for repairs. Instead, it rammed the nearest swarm vessel. Both ships exploded in a ball of fire and debris. The command deck fell silent. "Did they just—" Crix couldn't finish the sentence. On the ground level of Terminus Gate Station, Minho's Marines were already in combat. The swarm had breached the lower docks. Their ground forces looked like insects mixed with nightmares, all chittering mandibles and cutting claws. Coalition troops were falling back, firing as they retreated. Standard procedure. Preserve forces, establish defensive lines, wait for reinforcement. Minho's squad ran forward. "Lieutenant, you're going the wrong way," a Centauri soldier shouted. "No," Minho shouted back. "We're going exactly the right way." He slid behind a cargo container and opened fire. His squad spread out in a practiced pattern, each Marine taking position without orders. They'd done this so many times it was like breathing. The swarm creatures charged. Gina shot 3 before they got halfway. Minho took down 2 more. Private Daquan, their medic, was firing just as fast as the combat troops. Coalition medics stayed in the back, but human medics fought on the front line. A swarm warrior broke through, its claw catching Minho's shoulder and tearing through armor. Pain exploded down his arm. He switched his rifle to his other hand without missing a beat and put 3 rounds into the creature's head. "Sir, you're hit," Day shouted. "I'm still shooting, aren't I?" Minho called back. "Stay on target." Jatal was recording this with half of their eyes while watching the space battle with the others. The Watcher had documented wars for 300 years, but had never seen anything like this. Another human ship was disabled, engines dead, drifting. The logical action was to evacuate the crew. Instead, the ship used its last maneuvering thrusters to position itself between a coalition vessel and a group of swarm fighters. It took the hits meant for the coalition ship, shields gone, hull tearing open. Then its captain detonated the reactor. The explosion took out 6 swarm ships. "They're using themselves as weapons," Velmoth said, voice barely a whisper. "They're buying time for us to regroup," Crix realized. "Every human ship that engages draws fire from our vessels. He struggled with the concept. "They're sacrificing themselves to protect us." Captain Hana's forces had pushed deep into the station's lower levels. She moved like violence had a shape, and she was it. Her team followed. Disciplined but aggressive. They weren't trying to hold a line. They were hunting. "Swarm nest located," one of her soldiers reported. "Sector 7, heavily defended." "That's their command node for this sector," Hana said. "We take it out. They lose coordination." She looked at her team. 15 humans against an unknown number of swarm creatures. "Questions?" "Just one, Captain," a young Marine said. "Do we take prisoners?" Hana smiled like a predator. "Does the swarm?" "No, ma'am." "Then neither do we." They hit the nest like thunder. The swarm had numbers, but they'd evolved to fight species that valued their own lives above victory. They didn't know how to fight something that feared loss less than failure. In space, Commander Hyun's flagship was burning. 3 engines were gone. Life support was failing on 2 decks. Medical Bay was overwhelmed with casualties. The tactical officer reported 73 crew dead, 116 wounded. Hyun didn't order retreat. He ordered weapons to concentrate fire on the swarm command ship. "Sir, if we stay in the fight, we could lose the ship," his second officer said carefully. "Then we'll lose it killing that command vessel," Hyun replied. "All batteries fire." The human weapons were primitive by coalition standards, but they fired with a speed that made up for raw power. Hyun's ship became a dying animal making its last attack, pouring everything into the enemy. The swarm command ship's shields failed. Then its hull breached. Then it broke apart. And just like that, the swarm formation collapsed. Without central coordination, the swarm ships began to retreat. They weren't fleeing. They were following programming, pulling back to regroup, but the coalition forces, inspired by the humans' ferocity, didn't let them go. For the first time in 47 years, they pursued. On Terminus Station, Minho's squad held their position. They'd lost 2 Marines. Day was working on a 3rd who might not make it. Minho's arm hung useless, shredded by the swarm warrior's claw, but they'd held. The swarm ground forces were retreating. A Centauri soldier approached, staring at Minho's wound. "Why didn't you fall back? You're badly hurt." Minho looked at him with eyes that had seen too much. "Fall back to where? There's nowhere safe in a war. Might as well stand and fight." In the nest, Hana's team had won. 5 of her 15 were dead. The rest were wounded. But the nest was destroyed. She stood in the center of the carnage, breathing hard, and activated her comm. "Captain Hana to command. Objective secured. Requesting medical evac for casualties." "Medical is swamped," the response came. "Can you wait?" Hana looked at her wounded soldiers, at the ones who wouldn't see tomorrow despite Day's best efforts. "No rush," she lied. "We're stable." She sat down next to her dying soldiers and held their hands until the end. The battle lasted 7 hours. When it was over, the coalition had suffered 3,000 casualties. The humans had lost 4,000 from a much smaller force, a devastating loss by any measure. But they had won. Jatal stood in the medical bay, recording. Coalition doctors worked on coalition soldiers with efficiency and care. Human medics worked on human soldiers like they were fighting death itself. Day had been operating for 6 hours straight without rest, moving from patient to patient with mechanical precision. "How do you do this?" Jatal asked him. "How do you continue when you're exhausted, when your friends are dying?" Day didn't look up from his work. "Because if I stop, more of them die. Someone has to do this. So I do it." No emotion, no tears. Just duty. That night, Velmoth found Commander Hyun in his damaged ship. The commander was reading casualty reports, his face gray with exhaustion. "We won," Velmoth said. "Did we?" Hyun gestured to the names on his screen. 4,000 humans dead, for 1 gate. But the swarm retreated, for the first time in 47 years. Hyun nodded slowly. Yes, they retreated. They learned what happens when they fight something that doesn't fear death. He looked at Velmoth. "Is this what you wanted, Ambassador? Is this what the Coalition needs?" Velmoth didn't have an answer. The ambassador had watched species that valued life above all else, paired with a species that valued victory above life itself. Together, they had won. But at what cost? "The Coalition is calling it a victory," Velmoth said finally. "They want to deploy human forces to other fronts." "Of course they do." Hyun stood, wincing from his injuries. "We're effective. We get results." He walked to the window, looking at the debris field where thousands had died. "Just remember, Ambassador, every victory like this costs us. We bleed and die and break inside. We do it because we believe it matters. Because we believe you're worth saving." "Are we?" Velmoth asked quietly. Hyun smiled, sad and tired. "That's what we're about to find out. 5 battles. 5 victories. The news spread across Coalition space like wildfire. The Void Swarm could be beaten. Humanity had shown them how. But in the medical stations, in the quiet spaces between celebrations, a different story was being told. Dr. Yuna Beck stood in the human section of Medical Station 12. She wasn't treating patients. She was documenting them. The Coalition medical staff needed to understand human physiology if they were going to save human lives. What she was learning terrified her. "This soldier has 3 broken ribs, a collapsed lung, and severe internal bleeding," a Centauri doctor said, pointing to one patient. "He fought for 2 hours after receiving these injuries." "That's normal," Yuna said quietly. "Humans can function through pain that would incapacitate most species. It's not always beneficial. Sometimes we fight when we should stop." The doctor moved to the next bed. "This one has burns over 40% of her body. She carried 2 wounded comrades to safety before accepting treatment." Yuna checked the chart. Private Sora Lim, intelligence officer, third-degree burns, severe pain. She'll survive. The question is whether she'll want to return to duty. Return? The doctor's crystalline face reflected shock. Surely after such trauma... She'll request active duty within a week, Yuna said. They all do. And they did. The Coalition medical staff watched in growing horror as human soldiers with barely healed wounds requested reassignment. Soldiers missing limbs wanted prosthetics so they could fight. Those with psychological trauma refused counseling and went straight back to their units. In the Coalition Council chambers, the debate raged. "We're asking them to become monsters," Elder Miran said. The ancient being had lived through 15 wars and never seen anything like humanity. Every battle, they give pieces of themselves, their bodies, their minds, their souls, and we celebrate our victories without counting what they lose. General Crix stood with his 4 arms crossed. Since Terminus Gate, he'd fought alongside humans in 3 more battles. He'd seen things that haunted his dreams. What choice do we have? Before humanity. We were losing systems every month. Now we're taking them back. At what price? Velmoth asked. I've read the casualty reports. Humans are dying at 5 times the rate of Coalition forces. In absolute numbers, we're sacrificing them to save ourselves. They volunteered, Crix said. No one forced them. Because that's what they do. Velmoth's voice rose, unusual for the calm diplomat. They sacrifice themselves. It's in their nature, and we're exploiting that nature. The chamber fell silent. Watcher Jatal stepped forward. Council members, I request permission to present my findings. The holographic display activated. Images from the battles appeared, not the glorious victory shots, the other ones. Human soldiers with dead eyes, bodies being collected, a medic sitting alone, covered in blood, staring at nothing. I have recorded every battle, Jatal said. I have also recorded what happens after. The humans experience what their doctors call post-traumatic stress, nightmares, fear responses, psychological breakdown. But they bury these reactions. They pretend to be fine, because their culture values strength over healing. More images. A young Marine crying in a bathroom, thinking no one could see. An officer drinking alone in his quarters, hands shaking. Captain Hana sitting in an empty room, surrounded by photos of dead soldiers. They're breaking, Jatal said. And they won't admit it. Not to us. Not to each other. Sometimes not even to themselves. Elder Miran turned to Yuna, who had been invited to the session. Dr. Beck, is this true? Yuna stood slowly. Yes. We call it combat fatigue, shell shock, post-traumatic stress. Humans have been fighting each other for thousands of years. We know what war does to the mind, but knowing doesn't make it easier. She paused. My soldiers are suffering, but if you ask them to stop fighting, they'll refuse. Because now they're fighting for you, and humans don't abandon allies. Even if it destroys them? Miran asked. Especially then, Yuna said softly. In the intelligence center, Sora Lim worked despite the pain from her burns. She'd been cleared for light duty only, but intelligence work never stopped. She was analyzing intercepted swarm communications when she found something that made her heart race. Commander Hyun, she said into her comm, you need to see this. 10 minutes later, Hyun stood beside her, reading the data. His face showed nothing, but his hands gripped the table edge tight enough to hurt. They're afraid, Sora said. Look at these retreat patterns. The swarm is changing tactics. They're pulling back from sectors where humans are deployed. They're avoiding us. Hyun leaned closer. Can you confirm this? I've cross-referenced 15 engagements. Every time humans are present, the swarm withdraws earlier than they did against pure coalition forces. They're adapting, but not how we expected. They're not learning to fight us better. She looked up at Hyun. They're learning to fear us. This changed everything. The emergency council meeting happened within hours. Sora presented her findings to coalition leaders who listened with expressions ranging from awe to concern. The swarm hive mind is showing signs of, I hesitate to call it emotion, Sora explained. But the patterns suggest what humans would call anxiety, stress responses, hesitation. How is this possible? Crix demanded. The swarm is a collective intelligence. It doesn't feel fear. It didn't, Sora said, until it met humans. Think about it from their perspective. The swarm has consumed countless civilizations. All of them followed predictable patterns. They fought to preserve themselves. When casualties rose, they retreated. The swarm evolved to exploit this. She pulled up more data. But humans don't follow that pattern. We take casualties that would make other species surrender, and we keep fighting. We sacrifice ourselves in ways that don't make logical sense. To the swarm's collective mind, we're wrong. We violate the fundamental rules of how prey behaves. Velmoth understood. We're the predator that refuses to be prey. Exactly, Sora said, and it's breaking their decision-making process. They're experiencing something new, something that feels like fear. In the human barracks, Minho sat with his squad. His arm had healed, but it didn't work quite right anymore. Nerve damage, the doctors said. He could still fight, just not as well. Gina sat across from him, that distant look in her eyes. It's going to get worse, she said suddenly. What is? Minho asked, though he suspected he knew. The fighting. Now that they know we can win, they'll push harder, send us to worse places, more dangerous missions. She focused on him. We're going to lose a lot of people, Minho. He nodded. They all knew it. Nobody talked about it, but they all knew. Day Quan entered, fresh from another shift in medical. He looked like he'd aged 10 years in the past month. Lost 3 today, he said flatly, sitting down. Could have saved 2 if we had better equipment, but coalition medical supplies don't work well with human biology. Did you request upgrades? Minho asked. 5 times. They keep saying it's being processed. Day laughed bitterly. Meanwhile, humans die from treatable injuries because our alien friends can't prioritize medical supplies. Easy, Minho warned. They're doing their best. Are they? Day looked at him with hollow eyes. We're dying for them, Minho. The least they could do is make sure we have proper medical support. The tension in the room was thick. They were all feeling it. The strain of constant combat, the losses, the sense that they were expendable. Private Wung Pak broke the silence with his usual humor. You know what I heard. The swarm is scared of us. Actually scared. He grinned. We're so mean. We made the hive mind nervous. Despite everything, they laughed. It was a small moment of light in the darkness. Velmoth visited the human sections more often now, trying to understand, trying to see what the cost truly was. The ambassador found Captain Hana in the observation deck, watching stars slide past. Captain, Velmoth said softly. Ambassador. Hana didn't turn. Come to check on the pet humans? The bitterness surprised Velmoth. That's not fair. Isn't it? Now Hana looked at the ambassador. We've lost 6,000 soldiers in 5 battles. Do you know how many coalition soldiers died in the same battles? 2,000. We're 1/10 your population in this war. But we're taking 3/4 of the casualties. Your forces take more risks. Because we have to, Hana's voice cracked. Because if we don't, you lose. We've seen your tactics, Ambassador. Careful, measured, safe. It doesn't work against the swarm, so we pay the price for being effective. Velmoth moved closer. I know, and I'm sorry. We're asking too much. No, Hana said, quieter now. You're asking exactly what we offered. We said we'd help. We meant it. That doesn't make it easy. She turned back to the stars. I've written 47 letters to families. 47 soldiers under my command, dead. Each letter, I try to explain why their child, their parent, their spouse died fighting for aliens they'd never met. She wiped her eyes. How do I explain that? Velmoth had no answer. Days later, Elder Mir-An called a private meeting with Commander Hyun, Captain Hana, and Dr. Yuna. I want to understand, the ancient being said. Why do your people continue? Surely you see the cost. Why not withdraw? Let us fight our own war? Hyun exchanged glances with Hana and Yuna. Finally, he spoke. Because we've seen what the swarm does. They don't just kill, they consume, they erase. Every world they take, every species they destroy, it's like it never existed. He stood, walking to the window. Earth knows what it's like to face extinction. We've been there more than once, and someone has to stand against the things that erase civilizations. Even if it erases you? Mir-An asked. Especially then, Hana said. Because if we don't, who will? You? She shook her head. No offense, Elder, but your people aren't ready for what this war demands. You value life too much. And you don't value it enough, Mir-An said gently. Yuna spoke up. We value it differently. You see death as the end of possibility. We see it as the price of meaning. Our lives matter because we're willing to risk them for something larger than ourselves. Mir-An was quiet for a long time. You've taught us how to fight, but I fear you're also teaching us how to lose our souls. Then learn carefully, Hyun said, because the alternative is extinction. And we've decided that a galaxy with your civilizations in it, even changed, is better than a galaxy consumed by the swarm. The meeting ended, but Velmoth knew something fundamental had shifted. The coalition was winning, but they were becoming something different, something harder, something more like humanity. And nobody knew if that was salvation or damnation. The Abyss sector earned its name honestly. 300 light-years of space thick with swarm presence, dead worlds, and the debris of civilizations that no longer existed. Coalition scouts never returned from the Abyss. It was where the swarm came from, where their hive nodes bred and grew. It was suicide to go there. Commander Hyun volunteered. Absolutely not, General Crick said when Hyun presented the plan. We need you alive. You're too valuable to throw away on a suicide mission. It's not suicide, Hyun said calmly. It's a calculated risk. Intelligence shows a primary hive node at the center of the Abyss. We destroy that. The swarm loses coordination across 16 sectors. You destroy that. We lose our best commander and his fleet, Crix countered. Velmoth stepped forward. What would you need? Mixed forces, Hyun said. Humans for the assault teams, coalition ships for support and evacuation if things go wrong. 20 ships total. Fast in, hit hard, fast out. 20 ships against an entire sector, Crix said flatly. Yes. The silence stretched. Finally, Elder Mir-An spoke. If we authorize this, we're sending people to die. Not just humans. Coalition forces too. People are dying anyway, Captain Hana said. She'd come to support Hyun's plan. At least this way, their deaths might end the war. Crix's 4 eyes fixed on her. You're willing to lead ground teams? I'm willing to die if it saves the galaxy, Hana said simply. Isn't everyone? The answer in the council's silence was clear. No, not everyone. The mission was approved. Private Wong Pak checked his demolition charges for the 5th time. He was smiling, which worried the coalition soldiers working near him. How could someone smile before a suicide mission? Hey, he called to a nervous Centauri technician. Want to know a secret? What? The technician asked. The swarm has never seen demolitions work like human demolitions work. They think in terms of efficiency, minimal damage for maximum effect. His smile widened. Humans? We like things that go boom. Really big boom. Lieutenant Minho found him there. You ready? Born ready, Wong said, hefting a charge that looked too big to carry. This baby can take out a structure the size of a city block. I've got 20 of them. Try to come back alive, Minho said. I'll try. But if I don't? Wung shrugged. Make sure they spell my name right on the memorial. It's W-O-O-N-G, not Wong. Pilot Nari Jin sat in her fighter, running pre-flight checks. She had a reputation for impossible flying. Some said she could feel the ship like it was part of her body. Others whispered she was crazy, that she took risks no sane pilot would attempt. Both were probably true. Nari, Captain Hana's voice came through comms. You're our exit strategy. If things go bad down there, you get our people out. I'll get them out, Nari said. All of them. Don't make promises you can't keep. I don't, Nari said, and she meant it. The fleet entered the Abyss sector at maximum speed. The darkness here felt physical, like the swarm's presence had stained space itself. Dead worlds drifted past, stripped of life. Dr. Yuna studied sensor readings. The swarm concentration is increasing. They know we're here. Good, Hyun said. Let them come. The more they commit here, the fewer defend the hive node. Jatal recorded everything with growing dread. The Watcher had seen humans fight, but this was different. This was invasion into the enemy's home. This was walking into the predator's den. The swarm attacked in waves, small ships at first, testing, then larger vessels. The coalition ships held formation, shields overlapping, providing cover fire. The human ships moved independently, each captain making split-second decisions. They're trying to split us up, a coalition officer warned. Then we split up, Hyun ordered. All ships, free engagement. Trust your instincts. It went against every coalition tactical doctrine. But it worked. The human captains, freed from rigid formation, moved like a school of predatory fish. Each ship was a threat. Together, they were a nightmare. The landing teams launched. Hana led the assault force toward the hive node's location, a massive structure built into a dead moon. It looked organic, like a tumor growing on the moon's surface. That's where we're going? A young coalition soldier asked, voice shaking. That's home base, Minho said, checking his weapon. The heart of the beast. They flew through hostile space in transport ships that were never designed for combat. Nari led the fighter escort, her hands dancing over controls with practiced ease. She saw swarm fighters coming before sensors did, somehow always one step ahead. Incoming left, she called, spinning her fighter and opening fire. Transports, stay tight. Gina Rhee sat in the lead transport, eyes unfocused. 3 more waves, she said suddenly, then a break. That's when we land. How do you know? The pilot asked. I just do. And she was right. 3 more waves of swarm fighters attacked. Then a gap. The transports dove for the moon's surface. The landing was rough. They were under fire before they exited the ships. The swarm ground forces poured from the hive structure like angry insects. Go, 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 Hana shouted, leading her team out. They hit the ground, fighting. Coalition soldiers followed, more slowly, more carefully. They were brave, but they'd been taught to value their lives. Humans had been taught to complete the mission. Wung set up his demolitions along the hive structure's base. This thing is huge, he reported. I need more charges than I brought. Use what you have, Hyun's voice came through comms. Focus on structural weak points. On it, boss. Wung worked while Minho's squad kept swarm forces back. Bullets and energy bolts filled the air. Marines fell, but others took their place. In space, the battle was going badly. The swarm had committed massive forces. Hyun's flagship was burning. Again. He'd lost count of how many times his ships had been damaged in this war. Sir, we need to pull back, his tactical officer said. The fleet can't hold much longer. Hyun looked at the tactical display. The ground teams were inside the hive node. If they retreated now, those soldiers would die. We hold, he said. Sir, with respect, holding means losing ships. I know. Velmoth was aboard the flagship, having insisted on coming despite the danger. The ambassador moved through corridors filled with smoke and emergency lighting, helping where possible. Coalition and human crew worked side by side, the distinction between species forgotten in the crisis. Inside the hive node, Hana's team pushed deeper. The structure was a maze of organic corridors that seemed to pulse with life. Swarm creatures attacked from every direction. "This way," Gina said, somehow knowing. She led them through the maze with confidence. "The core is close." They found it in a chamber that defied description. The hive mind's central processor, if it could be called that, was a massive organic computer, pulsing, thinking, coordinating the swarm across space. "Woong!" Hana called. "Plant your charges." But the demolitions expert was already wounded, blood seeping through his armor. "I need time," he gasped, working through the pain. Minho's squad formed a perimeter. The swarm was coming. They could hear it, feel it. The entire hive knew they were here. "How long?" Hana asked. 10 minutes, Woong said. "Maybe 15. "We might not have 15, Minho said, firing down a corridor at approaching swarm. "Then buy me time," Woong said, his usual humor gone. He worked with shaking hands, placing charges with precision even as his body failed. The battle became desperate. Marines fell one by one. Coalition soldiers fought bravely, but the swarm was endless. For every creature killed, 2 more appeared. "Charges set!" Woong finally shouted. "Timer's running! Everyone out!" The retreat was chaos. They ran through corridors filled with swarm, fighting every step. Coalition soldiers helped wounded humans. Human soldiers covered coalition forces. The distinction meant nothing here. They were all just people trying to survive. But not everyone made it. Gina was hit, her leg nearly severed. Minho picked her up and ran. Daequan fought with one arm, the other hanging useless. Captain Hana was the last out, making sure everyone who could move was moving. At the exit, they found their path blocked. A massive swarm warrior, bigger than anything they'd seen before, blocked the way. Woong looked at the timer. 30 seconds. They'd never make it past the warrior in time. "Go!" he shouted, pushing the others back. "I'll hold it." "Woong, no!" Minho called. But Woong was already running forward, activating a charge in his hands. "Remember to spell my name right," he shouted, still smiling. The explosion took both Woong and the warrior. The path was clear. The team ran. They barely made it to the transports before the main charges detonated. The hive node collapsed in on itself, a chain reaction destroying the moon's entire surface. Nari flew through fire and debris, her transport damaged but still flying. "I've got them," she reported. "I've got survivors." But so many didn't survive. In space, the swarm fleet suddenly lost coordination. Ships began to drift, to collide with each other. The hive mind was disrupted. "Now," Hyun ordered, "all ships, full assault." The human and coalition fleet attacked as one. The swarm, confused and leaderless, fell apart. It wasn't a battle. It was a slaughter. But the cost. Hyun stood in the medical bay afterward. Captain Hana was there, standing despite her injuries. Lieutenant Minho sat in a corner, staring at nothing. Gina was in surgery. Day was somewhere else, treating others despite needing treatment himself. "Woong didn't make it," Hana said quietly. Hyun nodded. He'd read the reports. Woong Pak, 23 years old. Volunteered for the mission knowing it was suicide. Saved his team at the cost of his own life, just like hundreds of other humans in this war. "We won," Hyun said. "Did we?" Hana asked. Velmoth entered, moving carefully through the wounded. The ambassador had fought alongside humans for the first time, had seen what they truly were when facing death. "Commander," Velmoth said softly, I need to tell you something." Hyun looked at the ambassador. Velmoth's crystalline body was cracked, damaged in the battle, but the ambassador's eyes held something new. Understanding, perhaps, or horror. "I watched your people fight," Velmoth said. "I watched them die for my people. I watched a young man smile as he sacrificed himself to save others." The ambassador's voice cracked. "How do you live with this? How do you send people to die?" "I don't live with it," Hyun said. "I carry it, every name, every face, every soldier who doesn't come back." He looked at Velmoth. "That's the price of command. That's the cost of this war." "Is any cause worth this?" Velmoth asked. Hyun was quiet for a long moment. Finally, he said, "Ask me again when the war is over, if I survive to see it." The final assault came 3 months after the Abyss operation. Intelligence had located the swarm's primary nexus, the central hive mind that controlled everything. Destroy it, and the war would end. Fail, and the swarm would adapt and return stronger. Commander Hyun stood in the war room looking at faces he'd come to know. General Krix, who'd learned to trust human tactics. Velmoth, who'd fought alongside them and understood the cost. Elder Miran, who'd seen humanity change the coalition forever. Dr. Yuna, who'd documented everything. Watcher Jatal, whose recordings would tell this story to future generations. And his own people. Captain Hannah, harder now but still fighting. Lieutenant Minho, who'd lost so many friends he'd stopped counting. Pilot Nari, who'd never failed to bring people home. Medic Day, whose hands saved lives even as his eyes died a little more each day. Gina, walking on a prosthetic leg but still seeing things before they happened. Sora, her burn scars visible, but her mind sharp as ever. "This is it," Hyun said simply. "Everything we've done leads here. Every battle, every loss, every sacrifice. One final push." "We're ready," Hana said, and the other humans nodded. They were always ready. "The Coalition fleet stands with you," Krix said. His 4 eyes held respect now, not doubt. "We've learned from you. Now we fight beside you as equals." The fleet that assembled was the largest either side had ever committed. 500 ships, human and coalition together. 50,000 soldiers. It was everything they had left. Dr. Yuna had been working non-stop since the Abyss. She'd studied the captured swarm data, trying to understand their enemy. What she found changed everything. "The swarm isn't just afraid of us," she told the commanders. "They're breaking. Look at these patterns." She showed neural maps of swarm communication. "Normally, their hive mind is perfectly coordinated, but since we started fighting them, there are errors, hesitations, contradictions." "Why?" Velmoth asked. "Because we don't make sense to them," Yuna explained. "The swarm evolved to consume civilizations that fight logically, calculate odds, minimize losses, retreat when necessary. But humans fight emotionally. We sacrifice ourselves for intangible things like honor, duty, friendship. The swarm's collective intelligence can't process that. It's like, imagine trying to solve a math problem, but some of the numbers refuse to follow rules." "We're breaking their minds by refusing to break," Mir-An said slowly. "Exactly. And if we hit them hard enough, all at once, with enough illogical human behavior, their central nexus might just collapse under the contradiction." It was a gamble. Everything was a gamble. The fleet entered swarm space in a formation that mixed human aggression with coalition defense. It was a new way of fighting, born from months of learning from each other. The swarm was waiting. Of course they were. The battle began like all the others, but bigger. More ships, more fire, more chaos. Humans pressed forward while coalition forces provided covering fire and support. It was working. They were pushing through. On the ground assault ships, Hana's team prepared for the final drop. She looked at her soldiers. So few of the original ones remained. So many new faces trying to live up to those who'd died. "Listen up," she said. We're going into the heart of the Nexus. It's going to be bad. Some of us won't come back. Maybe all of us won't come back. She paused. But if we succeed, this war ends. Every species in the galaxy gets to live without the swarm. That's worth dying for. Ma'am, a young Marine said, what if we're scared? Hana smiled. Then you're human. Fear is natural. Courage is fighting anyway. Minho's squad was with her. Gina stood ready, her prosthetic leg as steady as her natural one. Dai checked his medical supplies one last time. New faces filled the gaps where Woong and others used to stand. You know, Minho said, I used to think we were special. That humanity had something other species didn't. Now I think we're just stubborn. Too stubborn to quit. Stubborn works, Gina said. I can see the future sometimes, remember? We win this, but not all of us see the end. Which ones? Minho asked. She looked at him with sad eyes. Would knowing change anything? No. Then it doesn't matter. In space, Commander Hyun's flagship led the charge. His ship had been repaired so many times, it was more patch than original hull. Like him, like all of them. Broken and repaired and broken again, but still fighting. The swarm threw everything at them, wave after wave of ships. The coalition might have faltered before, calculating odds, seeing the impossibility. But they'd learned. They held the line. Nari flew her fighter through hell itself. She'd volunteered to lead the escort for the assault ships, to clear a path through swarm space. Path is clear, she called. Transports, go now! The assault ships dove toward the Nexus planet. It was covered in swarm structures, a world-sized hive of living metal and organic technology. They crashed through the atmosphere under heavy fire. Ships exploded. Soldiers died before they even landed. But enough made it. Hana's boots hit the ground running. The swarm was everywhere. Push forward! Don't stop! She fired without aiming, trusting instinct. Her team followed. Coalition forces landed nearby. Centauri soldiers, Thalnari warriors, even ancient Miran had come, fighting despite their age. They'd learned from humans that some things were worth dying for. The Nexus core was underground. They had to fight through layers of swarm defenders. Every corridor was a battle. Every room cost lives. Minho's squad cleared rooms with practiced efficiency. They'd done this so many times it was automatic. Muscle memory from 1,000 firefights. But the swarm learned, too. A trap collapsed part of the structure. Minho's squad was separated. He found himself alone with Gina in a corridor facing a dozen swarm warriors. This is it, Gina said calmly. This is where I die. Not if I can help it, Minho said, positioning himself between her and the swarm. You can't. I saw this weeks ago. She smiled. It's okay. I made peace with it. She raised her weapon. But I'm taking as many of them as I can. They fought, and Gina was right. The swarm overwhelmed them. Minho was wounded, going down. He watched Gina fall, still fighting, still shooting until she had nothing left. But they'd held long enough. Daequan came through with reinforcements. The medic worked on Minho with shaking hands. Gina, he asked. Minho just shook his head. They pushed deeper. Every meter cost lives. Human and coalition soldiers died together, fought together, bled together. The difference between species didn't matter anymore. Captain Hana reached the Nexus core first. It was vast, incomprehensible, beautiful and terrible. The swarm's central mind, pulsing with thought. Sora was with her, carrying specialized charges designed to disrupt the Nexus. If we set these off, the entire hive mind collapses, she said. Do it, Hana ordered. But the swarm wasn't done. A final defense activated. Massive warriors flooded the chamber. Hana's team was outnumbered 10-1. Set the charges, Hana screamed, firing. We'll hold them. Sora worked while humans and coalition soldiers formed a perimeter. They died holding that line. One by one they fell, but they didn't break. Velmoth was there, fighting with weapons the ambassador had never imagined using. The diplomat had become a warrior, had learned what humans knew, that sometimes peace requires violence. "Charges set," Sora called. "Timer's running, we need to evacuate." "Go," Hana ordered. "Everyone out." They ran, but the swarm blocked the exits. They were trapped. Commander Hyun, monitoring from orbit, saw what was happening. "All ships," he said quietly, "target the Nexus coordinates. Fire everything." "Sir, our people are still in there," an officer protested. "I know," Hyun said, and his voice cracked. "They know too. They chose this. Fire." The fleet opened fire on the Nexus. The humans inside felt the bombardment begin. They knew what it meant. Captain Hana looked at her remaining soldiers. Coalition and human, bleeding together. "It's been an honor," she said. Then the world exploded. The Nexus collapsed. The swarm's central intelligence shattered. Across the galaxy, swarm ships stopped moving. The hive mind was dead. The war was over. But the cost. Commander Hyun stood in the memorial garden they'd built on the coalition home world. Thousands of names, so many humans, so many coalition soldiers who'd learned to fight like humans and died like them too. Velmoth found him there. The ambassador's crystalline body still bore scars from the final battle. "Captain Hana and her team are being honored as heroes," Velmoth said. "They were heroes long before they died," Hyun replied. "All of them were. The Council wants to thank you. They're calling humanity the saviors of the galaxy." Hyun laughed bitterly. "Saviors! We're the species that taught you how to die." "No," Velmoth said firmly. "You taught us how to live. For 47 years we were dying slowly, losing everything we'd built. You taught us that survival requires sacrifice, that peace requires warriors willing to fight for it." The ambassador paused. "Yes, we learned to fight like you, but we also learned to care like you, to protect each other like you do." Elder Miran joined them, ancient and wise. "I have lived 600 years. I've seen civilizations rise and fall, but I've never seen anything like humanity." The elder looked at the memorial. "You showed us the most important truth, that the universe respects only one thing, the will to persist." Dr. Yuna arrived with reports. "The psychological counseling program is working. Soldiers from both species are getting help. We're learning to heal, not just fight." "What about Minho?" Hyun asked. "He's struggling," Yuna admitted. "Lost his entire original squad. But he's teaching now, training new soldiers, trying to make sure others survive." Watcher Jatal had finished the documentary. They showed it that evening to the assembled council. It was called The Fear We Needed. The documentary showed everything: human sacrifice, coalition forces learning to fight back, the cost of victory, the price of peace. At the end, Jatal spoke directly to the camera. "We feared extinction, but what we discovered was worse. We discovered we had become soft. Millions of years of civilization had bred out our survival instincts. We'd forgotten that the universe is not kind. It does not care about wisdom or age. It respects only strength and will. Humanity reminded us. They showed us predators still exist. And more importantly, they showed us that predators can choose to protect instead of consume. They could have conquered us. They were fierce enough. Instead, they died for us. The swarm is gone. But the lesson remains. The galaxy is not safe because the threat is gone. It's safe because we learned to be dangerous when needed. Humanity taught us that the most terrifying thing in the universe isn't the monsters in the dark. It's the protectors willing to walk into that darkness. Years passed. The coalition rebuilt. Memorials stood on 100 worlds. Human tactical doctrine was taught in every military academy. But more importantly, humanity had changed the Coalition's spirit. Young Coalition soldiers trained under human instructors. They learned the balance between Coalition wisdom and human aggression. They learned to calculate odds, but also to take necessary risks. One young Centauri soldier asked his instructor, a human veteran named Minho, "How do you face death without fear?" Minho, older now, scarred and tired, smiled. "We don't face it without fear. We face it with fear. But we face it anyway. That's the difference. Fear is natural. Courage is acting despite fear." "Is that what makes humans special?" "No," Minho said. "What makes us special is that we choose to protect people we've never met. We fight for causes bigger than ourselves. That's not unique to humans. Every species can do it. We just remembered first." Commander Hyun eventually retired. He'd seen too much, lost too much. On his last day, he visited the memorial one final time, ran his fingers over the names, Woong Pak, Gina Rhee, Hana Kei, thousands more. Velmoth found him there. The ambassador had become Earth's strongest advocate in the council. "Any regrets?" Velmoth asked. "Every day," Hyun said. "Every name here is a regret. But if I could go back, knowing the cost, I'd do it again. Because the alternative was watching the galaxy burn." "The Coalition will never forget what humanity did." "Good," Hyun said, "because we paid in blood for you to remember. Make sure it means something." On a distant frontier, new threats emerged. Space was infinite, and so were its dangers. But this time, the Coalition was ready. They had learned from humanity, not just tactics but philosophy, the will to fight, the courage to sacrifice, the strength to protect. A message was sent to Earth. New dangers required new heroes. Would humanity answer? The answer came back immediately. "We're on our way." Because that's what humans did. They ran toward danger, not from it. They protected the weak. They fought the darkness, not because they were fearless, because they were afraid, and fought anyway. In the end, that made all the difference. The galaxy had learned to fear again, and in that fear, found the strength to survive. The memorial garden grew larger each year, but so did the living. More species joined the Coalition, protected by the warriors who'd learned from humanity. The war was over, but the watch continued. Because someone had to stand guard. Someone had to walk the darkness so others could sleep safely. Humanity had shown them how, and the galaxy would never forget.